question. I think what happened is sort of in phase one of the consent decree, there was a lot of CPC, DOJ kind of conversation around policies. And then as we moved into phase two, we were looking for the city to take more of a leading role in terms of reaching out to and incorporating CPC feedback. So we moved to a sort of positioning where we look to the city to get feedback from you guys and incorporate that into the draft, either before we see the draft at all or sort of separate from our process. But that doesn't mean that we're not independently interested in what the CPC's positions are or sort of open to collaborating if that's helpful. So for instance, if we both had a position about a specific thing in a policy, we both shared a similar concern, and the city didn't share that concern, that would certainly be a time where we would want to work together to sort of try and move something forward. So that's why I am listening today to hear if what your concerns are, and we are just in the process of reviewing it ourselves. But I can certainly be back in touch about any comments we have, if that would be helpful.
That would be very helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, of course.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Christina? All right, moving right along. Updates, any updates from the monitor? Ron, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sounds like a commercial, doesn't it? I can't be more comprehensive than Christina has with regard to the monitoring plan. It's still a work in progress. There have been some discussions. I don't think that there's any intent to not engage with the CPC at this juncture. It's just a juncture that we're at. This second phase, if you will, of the monitor's existence after the initial 7 years is of course going to be very different than the first phase. The ultimate goal of this effort is to assure that the city and the other partners and stakeholders can function in a sustainable manner on their own. And so we're taking great care to assure that that in fact happens.
All right, thank you, Ron. Any questions or comments for Ron? All right, next update is that update from the council. Anyone from the council here? All right. Any updates from the mayor's office?
Good morning, everyone. Austin with the mayor's office. No update in particular today, but happy to take any questions if they come up.
Thank you, Austin. Any questions for Austin today? All right. Next one. Any updates from OPA or OIG?
Good morning, Reverend Williams and commissioners. This is Lisa Judge. No updates from us, but I noticed that there's an item about Sentinel event review on the agenda, so I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is Sentinel review, event update, lead commissioner Alina and Douglas. Alina?
I'm happy to chime in, but Alina, do you want to go first? If not, no worries, I can. Okay, no problem. So yeah, we've been meeting over the past several weeks. A group, so Alina, myself, and various folks that the OIG is tapped to put together this planning group that is planning to put together another group to look at systemic issues that led to problematic outcomes in the 2020 protests, and what specifically happened at a systemic level with SPD that contributed to negative outcomes. So violence to protesters and officers, and other types of negative outcomes. And so it's a really wide in scope challenge. I mean, the protests are really ongoing, and so one kind of important task for this group has been trying to figure out how to narrow the scope to actually make this project manageable. And one way that we've done that, with the help of the folks at the OIG, have put together some really fascinating data analysis, is looking at the days in the protests that had a particularly high level of use of force. And so we've started by thinking that we're going to break up this project into maybe phases, so that the eventual Sentinel event review group kind of takes this project in chunks. And so the first kind of phase is going to be likely May 30th and June 1st, which were the first couple days of the protest and had a very high use of force across the city, as well as some other kind of problematic outcomes. I think one thing that's interesting, or a unique facet about this project, is it's really not looking at ascribing blame per se. It's really about kind of looking for solutions to problematic outcomes, if I'm saying that correctly. And so the group's going to have representation from CPC and academic experts and other community folks. And so we're kind of in the final planning stages before this actual group launches in 2021.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, Alina, anything I'm missing?
Douglas did a great job of talking about what we're doing, and I'm particularly interested in the approach of like, I think the intersectional approach of making sure that we have folks that can speak to healing and speak to facilitating those conversations, because having all of those different groups of people in the same room talking about that, especially with like historical and present trauma that people have, it'll be, I think, a task to effectively like hold space for all of those things. So yeah, Douglas did a great job of talking about the process.
All right. Thank you so much. Any questions for Alina and Douglas? Thank you. Great. Appreciate that. I just wanted.
Many questions, but I wanted to thank both Alina and Douglas for participating in the process. I know that I've been on some of the meetings, and they, kind of grapple with some very difficult issues and complicated issues. And I really appreciate your being involved in those conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. Inspector Judge just raised her hand.
Thank you. I just also wanted to say thanks to Alina and Douglas and Prachi and Reverend Walden, who've been really helpful in this planning group process. And one thing that I wanted to mention, Alina mentioned facilitation. We've been pretty deliberate about trying to get facilitators who could maybe lead us in a different style of communication. I think we all know that community and government, frequently talk past each other, don't truly take each other's experiences and perspectives into account. And so we're trying something that I think is really innovative by having one of the facilitators be an expert in peacemaking circles. And we're going to start the entire exercise with peacemaking circle. That's going to be the first day, and that facilitator will be part of the process throughout. So this is it's exciting for me to really be doing something that's different in terms of communication with each other. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inspector Judge. Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to say I'm glad I'm not the only person that has out of control animals in their Zoom meetings. To Aaron and Suzette, thank you. It makes me feel less alone. And then also I just wanted, just a last thing, just to what Douglas and Inspector Judge were saying too, is that what I appreciate about this process is really trying to get to the systemic root of like why something turned out bad, why harm happened, why results were negative, to try to address that to make sure it doesn't happen again. So while I understand people, while I understand the people grappling with like wanting to say this thing happened, bring those people forward so we can punish them. That's not the point of this. That's a separate conversation that I'm not going to volunteer to be in. I'm volunteering to be in the conversation of like how we address the root of the issue to make sure that those things don't happen again. And I think having all of those people in the room, what makes me feel more hopeful than maybe some of the things that we've tried to accomplish as a CPC and have hit barriers, is that all groups, all people who are affected, different groups who are affected by what happened this summer, for example, are all going to be in the room together. And so I think that there's a little more opportunity for us to actually influence how we're changing policy or influencing how we're moving forward. So I just wanted to make that clarity too, because I don't think I was clear at first in joining this process, and I am now. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Alina. All right. Next item on our agenda is the review of proposed CPC bylaw changes. Lead Commissioner Aaron Goodman.
Hello, thank you, Evan Williams. So in your packet today, you have received a second copy with no changes from the one you received last meeting of the bylaws, and also a copy of a resolution. I have some time we set aside to answer any questions if people have had them, and to go through kind of what the bylaws will look like. The key to a bylaws revision, just to be clear, is that we are a relatively new organization and have gone through significant growth from a small entity into a larger entity with 3 different appointing authorities. And so it was made sense to take a look at our function and how we need it to function, and make sure that our bylaws were in line with that, and that the structure allows us to be effective. So that was the intent going into these bylaws. The governance committee met almost weekly for close to a year on this. It was a significant process. Last meeting, I sent out the introduction to the bylaws, which included just some basic overview of the changes. But I'm going to highlight a couple of things that are, significant, so that we can have a discussion. Then once we've had the discussion, there is a resolution to do bylaws changes. We have to do it by resolution. The copy of that resolution was included, but we will have to read it into the record. So key changes is the addition of a second elected body. So in addition to the co-chairs, we would be introducing a sergeant at arms. there's a detailed description of their responsibilities, but primarily the sergeant at arms, as we are envisioning it, is a combination of a traditional sergeant at arms for a board, which would be the individual that ensures decorum, makes sure that meetings function smoothly, would be the one organizing public comment, and a parliamentarian. And that is the individual who is really knowledgeable about Robert's Rules of Order and our bylaws to make sure that we are, following the rules we set out for ourselves. This sergeant at arms does have an additional responsibility the way we have envisioned it. And that is that as an independent body, we do not answer to like the traditional, the mayor or the council in a way that another commission might. And so when there is an issue for a commissioner, if there's an issue for staff, we've given a very detailed process through the city HR system. But if there is a commissioner grievance, we didn't really have a process for addressing that. And so we have created a process within these bylaws and designated that the sergeant at arms would be the person responsible for managing any investigation or any mediation or in handling that. And of course, if the complaint were against the sergeant at arms, then the co-chairs would be the ones responsible. So that's one key change, is this additional elected official. The other key change I alluded to in that is that we are establishing a process for public comment. Historically, and it was in our bylaws that we did not accept public comment. It has become very clear over the last year that this is something that we needed to look at and understand, that there needed to be a process for community to speak to us. So we have developed and designed a process that will look very similar to those of you who have provided public comment to City Council, where people can sign up. They get a certain amount of time and can speak to an item that is on the current agenda. But really, the thinking behind this provides an opportunity for public comment, but really, understanding the goals for the new community engagement, the new version of the Community Engagement Committee, where it is much more of an engaged conversation between community members. And as our hope is that the real meaningful conversations will take place in that venue. But we do want to have an outlet, an opportunity for folks to provide public comment within this meeting. So the other thing I want to point out is a little change to the committee structure. It's not a structural change, it's a name change. So once we have completed this bylaws process, the governance committee, as it has existed for the last year and a half as an ad hoc committee, will cease to function as the governance committee, and the current strategy committee will be renamed the governance committee. It will manage all of the responsibilities that the current strategy committee has, but will also take on any governance responsibilities, because if you look at it, strategy is actually a governance responsibility, as part of governance. And so it won't really change except the name. This governance committee still has the ED search under its umbrella, but I feel for clarity, we could move forward calling that the ED search committee, because as an ad hoc committee. And then the other permanent committee would be the Community Engagement Committee. We have several other committees that are ad hoc, and this standing versus ad hoc does not diminish their importance. It just creates a situation where, we can be flexible and adaptable based on the experience of our commissioners. So, around a certain topic, to the needs of the community based on, current events and emerging issues. And so it allows us the most flexibility to create committees that serve the needs of the CPC. Other than that, there really weren't significant, there is, actually I should go back. Under administration and operation, which is Article 2, we did just really clarify the processes of who's responsible for what and how the office works, how staff is supervised, and what that and that process to look like. So I'm going to stop there and open it up to questions. Go ahead.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Any questions for Aaron? Any questions? Because we're going to vote on accepting these proposed changes to the bylaws. So if there's any points of clarification,
I have a question because I think the vote has to be more significant. Aaron, you want to talk about the quorum for the vote because you didn't mention that. So yeah.
In our current bylaws, and we didn't make a change in the new bylaws, the bylaws change requires a couple of steps. One, it needs to be introduced at a meeting prior to the meeting that's voted on. We introduced this last time. And it needs to be approved by 2/3 of the entire commission, not 2/3 of the people in a meeting, but 2/3 of the entire commission for a seated commission. So purposefully at this point, we have 15 members. So we would need 10 people, and we will for this vote, Reverend Williams, need to do a roll call so we can do a count. We would need 10 people to vote aye to pass these these bylaws. And so what I'd like to do now is read the resolution into the record. Okay. This is dated December 16th. Seattle Community Police Commission Resolution 20-01. A resolution amending the Seattle Community Police Commission's bylaws by a three-quarter vote of the, a three-quarters vote of the commission's membership. I said 2/3 before, and I apologize. I knew this. Whereas the Community Police Commission, the commission, was established by Ordinance 124021 in 2012, and whereas in 2017, the City Council passed Ordinance 125315, also known as the Police Accountability Ordinance, which subsumed Ordinance 124021 and expanded the Commission's scope of oversight. And whereas pursuant to Seattle Municipal Code Section 3.29.30.a, as stated in Ordinance 125315, the Commission may adopt bylaws to govern its own activities. And whereas the Commission's current bylaws were adopted on November 15th, 2017, and whereas pursuant to Article 12 amendments of the Commission's bylaws, amendments to the bylaws require a resolution adopted by a vote of at least 2/3 of the Commission's membership. May it resolve that the Seattle Community Police Commission, Section 1, Seattle Community Police Commission adopts the attached revised bylaws, which shall take immediate effect. Section 2, this resolution will be executed by the Commission co-chair serving as presiding officer at the meeting during which this resolution is passed. And then this says adopted by the Community Police Commission on the 16th day of December 2020. Once we make a vote, if it passes, then I would ask that one of the co-chairs print out this document, sign it, and send it to our CAO contact, to Teresa and Gary's, just so that they have that legal record. We will also need to send it into OCC and some other, place to have it registered. I'm seeing a note that Officer Mullen can get on, but I want to make sure that we have everybody here because we will need 10 people to vote. I could make the motion. There's no reason I can't as the chair of the governance committee, but I would prefer to ask for someone else to make the motion to adopt this resolution.
And Aaron, this is Gary with the City Attorney's Office. Just to clarify, it is a 2/3 vote that is required. So I think that 3/4 supermajority reference in the title of the resolution it's a typo, I believe.
So Gary, could we make that type of edit in the resolution in this meeting, or do we have to go back and fix it beforehand?
You can make that amendment in this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Because that actually threw me when I read it, obviously.
Yes, it is.
So what we would need is a motion to approve this resolution with the change of 2/3 to that first line.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, is there a motion?
Step away from the chair and make a motion that the resolution be amended to reflect what the city attorney just said.
A second?
I second that. It's Emma.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Any further discussion? So I'll do a roll call and say yea or nay. Prachi,
Yay.
Emma,
Yay.
Scott,
Yay.
Suzette,
Yay.
Colleen? Aaron,
Yay.
Esther,
Yay.
is Officer Mullins on yet?
I just re-texted him the number, so he should be joining shortly, but I don't believe so.
Okay, let's go to Alina.
Yes.
Joseph? Douglas?
Yes.
Who's that? Thought I heard someone other than Douglas.
I believe Joseph is on if that was him trying to vote as well.
Okay, Joseph, was that you? Okay. Reverend Walden,
Yes.
LaRon,
Yes.
and myself, yay.
By my count, we are over the required number, and so we have passed. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the governance committee that worked so hard on this and really could not have done it without the input of everybody and the city attorney's office. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate your diligence and just having such a critical eye and your commitment to this. So thank you so much. I appreciate you as well as work of the governance committee.
Reverend Williams, may I just say something about that as a member of the governance committee?
Yes.
Aaron, I don't even know if people understand like the level of commitment it took to actually accomplish this goal and how you actively took a role in rewriting this. And I have to tell you, when I think about having this structure, particularly related to adding public comment and doing it in a meaningful way, it really gives me a lot of hope. And it's what I've always like really wanted for the commission. And so I just want to express like tremendous gratitude to you, and just hope people really acknowledge the heavy lift it was. So good work.
Yeah, I absolutely second everything that I think that everything people's comments are flowing in the chats, as well as everything that you said, Esther. It was a massive lift that required a great deal of attention to detail, communication with the city attorney's office. Also, thank you to the city attorney's office for your guidance through this process. But Aaron, this was a truly heavy lift, and really appreciate it. I think it'll be structurally incredibly helpful for the CPC as we move forward.
Thank you. I want to agree with that also. I was part of that committee also, but I really want to thank Aaron and everyone else who stayed the course on it, because it was a long time, started under previous with Bessie, and it took a long time, longer than people would think. It's almost as long as trying to get something filed in the court. So it's been a long time. So thank you so much, Aaron and everyone else who worked on it. Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Hey, Aaron, this is Brandy. This is just real quick. I also wanted to thank you as well as somebody that was a formerly part of the governance committee. I appreciate everything that you did and everybody else that was on it, especially on behalf of the whole commission and staff. We just appreciate you. So there are no additional words I could add. I just wanted you to hear my voice and know that I appreciated you leading the charge.
All right. Any other comments? Any other kudos? All right, thank you.
Not kudos, Reverend Williams, but now everybody's got to read them.
Thanks, Esther. Absolutely. Thank you. All right. At this point, we had an hour laid out for review of SBD's proposed revisions for crowd control and use of force policies. And as I stated earlier, Chief Courtner will not be with us today. And Brandy, do you want to say anything about this?
Yeah, just that we received an email yesterday that Chief Corner was not going to be able to join us, that they had a different understanding for why they were going to be coming back today. And so we decided to go ahead to honor the fact that we had put these questions together and worked really hard on being able to have this conversation, to have this dialogue with SPD. We chose to move forward with said questions and figure out a way to come up with an outline on behalf of the commissioners of how you all would like to address this, the invitation and the conversation that we could have had today. And so I will put it back over to the co-chairs to add any additional information, but I do want you to know that we did extend it. They were able to review the questions, and after reviewing the questions, shared that they did not feel that this would be the forum for the list of questions that we put together. So we respect that, but we also respectfully feel like we would like to continue to have that conversation. So we really love to hear from commissioners about what do you all think would be the best way to have our voices heard and address what we would have liked to have done today in an open dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. Alina?
Yeah, Brandy, I was just curious if you could, what was their understanding of what was supposed to happen today? Because it seemed like in the last meeting, we were all on the same page.
Well, and so here's the thing, Alina, I can't really respond to that because I wasn't here. I was out sick during that meeting. So I don't know how that meeting went to see if there was maybe like a change of like course or whatever. So I'd be really interested in hearing from you all how that meeting was set up and any input that you have in relation to that, because I thought everything was a go as well. And like I said, I didn't have an opportunity to see how the December 2nd meeting went.
Prachi?
Yeah, and one of the, Alina, I share very much where it is that you're coming from. It was very much our understanding, or at least my understanding, coming out of that last conversation that, what we would do during this conversation is have a more in-depth kind of back and forth about the changes that SPD was proposing to the use of force policies and the crowd control weapons policies. And that was one of the reasons why, and thank you so much to Jesse and all of the staff for putting questions together for Chief Assistant Coordinator to review prior to this particular meeting. Their response to the questions that we sent is something that we actually also just received it last evening. So we sent it around. And so you should have it. But it is my understanding that simply based on that response, that they had believed that this conversation would not be a conversation about substance. It would be a conversation about form. And as a result, when we had sent questions over about the substance of the policy changes and the ways in which community would be involved in any of the policy changes SPD was proposing, that was not the conversation that they had anticipated being in. And so, from my perspective, one of the things that I think is incredibly important is that we do develop, nevertheless, our response as the CPC to the policy changes and a meaningful way in which SPD interacts with community in order to ensure that any policy changes that they are proposing are responsive to community voices. But that's kind of the landscape that I was thinking about, in terms of the previous conversation and what maybe we could discuss moving forward, but it doesn't have to look like that.
Thank you, Prachi. Rem Walden?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the questions was very enlightened, and that if we have an opportunity, we should go around and maybe talk about some of the questions and develop the next steps, because clearly there's a miscommunication someplace, and clearly what we saw this summer has to really be looked at, and we know. I mean, no one has said this, but from my understanding, they have to be out of compliance on the use of force policy. I mean, somehow, it's no way that they could be in compliance, and that has to be fixed. And it was a lot of people. And of course, we also know that the 2015, 2016 recommendations around crowd control and flash bombs and all that was never really implemented or trained on. And so what assurance do we have going forward that any recommendations are going to be, even though the court signed off on it, what do we have? What do we recommend? How do we know for sure that the officer is going to be trained to the policy and be held to that accountability on the training to the policy? So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions, and I think it behooves us to just move forward and develop and then and get back with them and see how we can work together on this, because clearly this is the community over here, and we need to be working together on that. So
thank you, Rem Walden. Aaron?
Yeah, I just want to, I do, and I did read the letter that Chief Corner sent out this morning, and it did sound to me like after January 8th that they would be prepared to have this more robust conversation. I also did have a little bit of confusion of form and structure, but definitely saw the invitation to have that deeper conversation at that time. And I think it's important that we do.
Thanks, Aaron. Any other questions or comments? Douglas?
Yeah, Aaron, that's how I read the note from the chief as well. And it seemed it also seemed like they're inviting us to offer written questions before January 8th. So I would just encourage us to also take advantage of that opportunity.
Thanks, Douglas. No, I think it's important that we understand that, since day one, since the inception of CPC, use of force policies was probably the number one policy that we had to address. So I don't know how Assistant Chief would think was very telling to us that this is something that we need to pay particular and critical attention to. So I think we all need to be engaged in this process. And if there are any other additional questions that we have, we need to get the. I guess they just wasn't prepared and wasn't expecting that we were going to have such a critical eye on these policies, but that's paramount to what we do as CPC. Any other questions or comments? And how do we move forward from here? Prachi?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us, and I would be very curious to hear what the thoughts are of other commissioners. You know, I understand the January 8th kind of marker that they have set out. My concern is that any of these policies move forward in a meaningful way without getting full community input, and that any kind of community input in the policies is more of an afterthought than, you know, being kind of woven into the way in which these changes are being made as they're being made. And so, you know, I think that to me is something that would be critical for us to think about. I know that there are, you know, many people on this call who have a lot of experience trying to develop kind of community engagement. You know, I would, you know, encourage any input to SPD that's what it would look like. I know, Jesse, you had thoughts about what that structure could also look like, but there is a way in which this conversation could go too far down the road in terms of the substantive content of the policies, so that by the time community is given an opportunity to provide input, it's a little bit too late, and the only people who've been involved are, you know, people who are at the higher level, potentially accountability structures. So that's the, you know, kind of cautionary piece in my mind.
Thanks, Prachi. Any other comments? Oh, Walden.
And also, I think that all of this is due in the courts by the end of January. And so that puts us at another disadvantage on some level. If we're going to file anything in the courts, we need to figure out, because all of that takes time and all of that, unless the parties are going to ask for an extension on all of that, because I think the filing, and maybe I'm not correct on that, but I think the filing is somewhere at the end of January and maybe the 1st of February. And to get a community engagement on some of this and to be able to get it back, and then for us to, write up, whether we're going to put in just a letter or a brief or whatever, all that still has to be determined. But yeah, there's this opportunity that we don't want to let go by. Because time is always of the essence when it comes to this. Thanks.
Okay. I think Christina mentioned she didn't think there is a deadline for the filing or use of force policy revisions. So we need to take that into consideration. Any other comments from CPC commissioners?
It's just really frustrating. This is really frustrating to send a 100-page document, ask us to review, leave it as though we're going to be able to talk. I mean, I don't understand. Ranger, bro, come on, dude. I don't understand what the difference is between, I don't even know what kind of questions I would have asked in respect to how policies are written or organized, or what does form mean? Like, obviously the question is substantive. So, overall, all these policies are like, if somebody breaks them, then what happens? Some of these are very, serious proposed policy adjustments, especially in use of force. And then some of the language in there is also a little troubling of like, I don't know how that is actually going to shift what officers are doing out in the field. So I don't know if someone can clarify to me what the difference is between, substantive discussion and form, that would be helpful. I don't know if anybody else has an understanding of what the difference is.
Well, the community, if when they're being pepper sprayed, they don't know the difference either, and they don't want to talk. They don't want to have an intellectual. They don't want to have an intellectual discussion about the two different words, because they were the recipient of that event as it went off the rails, and so all those are just like it's a stalling process, and so we just have to figure out how we're going to work around it.
Do we know if SPD has any plan to have a community forum on policy proposed policy changes, or is that like, no, they don't know?
We don't know yet. They haven't detailed anything to us, but I know that that's some concerns that came up in the strategy meeting, and I imagine that we can discuss here today.
Any other comments? Are there, in light of how this has transpired, are there any additional questions we want to add to this list? I guess the form and substantive question needs to be added to it. I mean,
Also, excuse me, I'm sorry. I can wait till you're done, Reverend Williams.
well, to me, it sounds like when you use the word form, it implies that you're just going through the formality of presenting this to us as a CPC to just to read it and then any questions about the layout of it. But when you talk about substantive, we're talking about reading between the lines and what's the implications of each component of the policy. And those are the questions, those are the hard questions that we're asking is when you read between the lines, does this really bring about true reform? And does it really, when the rubber hits the road on the streets, is this really constitutional policing in BIPOC communities, especially in Black communities?
Well, also, I think one of the fundamental questions to ask, are they planning to engage on this with the community, or are they dropping at it in our lap and not absolutely telling us or asking us to do that? I mean, so I think it's another question too, because if they're asking us to do the community engagement for them, then they should ask us in a different way. And then also should maybe subscribe a little some resources for us if that's what they're asking. And if not, then ask them where their community outreach is going to look like, and maybe we should be asking them what the community outreach proposal looks like to the community, so that we can examine that and see if they're going to be asking the right questions to be able to solicit the information that's necessary.
Thanks, Reverend Walden. What are some other thoughts? Because I think we've carved out an hour for this section. We really need your input, and we really need to engage in this so that when January 8th comes, because this is our last meeting for the year. And so we really need to be engaged in this. And I think our next meeting is when? Is it January 8th?
I believe it's
January 6th, Reverend Williams.
January 6th. Okay, thanks.
What's supposed to happen at the January 8th? So if there's not a deadline for those policy issues, what is the January 8th date?
I believe that's just for submitting feedback on the policy changes to SPD. So like initial feedbacks.
Are our other accountability partners, are they asking the same questions, or are there other questions our accountability partners are asking? And what is their perspective on this? Is Inspector Judge still with us?
Yes, I'm here, Reverend Williams.
Oh, thank you.
We've been asked also to provide input on the policies that were sent out by SPD by January 8th. So I think, not having the same obligations that you folks do for community engagement and, the level of consensus and outreach that you have to do is different than I do in my office. I think, we have the luxury of being able to just spend time with that, formulate our own questions, concerns, comments, whatever, and provide it to SPD within the timeline. So I think that we're differently situated, but I certainly, appreciate and, I understand the position that you folks are in because you've got a different job to do with community. I don't know if that's helpful to the discussion or not, but those are just my thoughts.
All right, thank you, Inspector General. Yes, Prachi?
So I think, I think one of the reflections that I have, and if it's helpful for the purposes of this call, I think also, Jesse can jump into some of the substantive proposals that were made. I think I've spent a fair amount of time kind of distilling them down into bullet points, which you should have as well in your inboxes. But for me, I find ourselves at a little bit of an impasse, because in order for us to provide the kind of feedback it is that SPD is saying that they're asking for, what we were saying was that we need fundamentally some questions to be answered. What we need as a prerequisite to be able to provide that information to them, and that's what we were doing by providing those questions ahead of time. And so, to me, January 8th or not, I have no sense that it's not clear to me that SPD is committing to come to a meeting after January 8th or closer to January 8th in order to have that conversation with us. And so, from my perspective, the reason why we put these questions together, if people have additional questions, then we, would potentially need to think about moving forward as the CPC, and having a more formal request of SPD and saying that we want to provide feedback. What we want to do is provide that feedback as a CPC, but we also want to know what SPD's broader plan is in engaging the community, because that's something that they have a separate obligation to do and not just attempt to do via the CPC. And so, from my perspective, I think that that's where I sit. But Jesse, I know you had also developed a plan around what community engagement could look like and the questions around that. So feel free to chime in as well.
Yeah, so since these are such major changes, I mean, it touches on everything from like when officers can use force to when they can use police dogs to when they can use blast balls, tear gas. These are huge, huge changes. Like, what would take the consent decree months and months and months and months to do. And we really haven't had any chance to get public input on these changes. The proposed changes haven't been made public, like on SPD's channels or anything. So one of the questions that I had was whether the CPC should be recommending that at the very, very minimum, SPD hold public hearings on these policy changes, possibly like policy, public hearings separated out by like use of force and crowd control, and actually gather community input that way, because really these changes, they don't line up very well with the CPC's recommendations or really any other accountability body's recommendations. So if those changes aren't incorporated through that lens, is SPD getting like community feedback on these options? So I drafted some language around just like how we could ask for public hearings, and shared that with the strategy committee, but happy to answer any questions about that.
Thanks, Jesse. Any other questions for Jesse or comment? Understand that Officer Mullen is with us now.
I would just like to say, Jesse, I really appreciate that perspective. And I think you're right. That's a bare minimum. I also think that this is an opportunity for us to strengthen our partnership and level of accountability, right? Because they should really it's our community engagement committee. And I think that they should be participating with that committee to be able to get this information out and to actively engage community in their opinions about these changes. And I think that's our responsibility as a CPC, along with theirs. I think, again, maybe I'm always advocating to be more aggressive, and to be more firm. But I mean, this like idea that it's a loose recommendation is really an issue for me. So I feel like we need to go stronger.
Thanks, Esther. I agree with you, Esther, 100%.
We also have to say we always be somehow we do act on the times when we still being they're not absolutely bringing us the information or following through. I mean, part of community engagement is part of their responsibility also to reach out and to engage the community. And they sometimes don't do that. If so, we don't always know about it. There's a communication situation here, and it's been going on for a while, and stuff like that. So I'll agree with Esther, but I also know that it's not that we have not been firm. I mean, in that way. I mean, we've been firm, and now I guess it's time to be firm again. And for this piece right here, it's such a major change that I think that we have to maybe, along with what Esther them is saying, is put the brakes on for us. Do what we can do, but actually do some more nudging in a public way or something for them to engage on this. This is a major change. It's a major change, and we need to be more engaged on that, and the community needs to know about it in a good way. And that's part of our responsibility, is to get that information out to different parts of the community.
Thanks, Reverend Walden. Ron Ward?
Can you hear me, Reverend Walden or Reverend Williams?
Yes.
May I request that I be forwarded a copy of the supplemental questions that the CPC has formulated?
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Ward, we'll send that to you right now.
Thank you very much, Brandy.
So what are our next steps for this? How are we to
I mean, I think it's really hard to get community engagement or community voices in here if that stuff isn't public. So I guess that's too much for us to go through 100 pages of that. It would be great to have an opportunity for community to have access to that information and to review that. I don't feel like SPD is going to like that idea, because then the community knows what's up in terms of like how to protect themselves in regards to use of force and policy changes. But it's really hard for us to engage and provide that information if it's not public. So even though we're being tasked with community engagement, it makes it really difficult when we can't share pertinent information to get that. Just because I don't know if SPD has a idea that, because we are representatives, we are some representatives from community, that we speak for everybody. I mean, that's just like a dangerous monolith of like BIPOC communities and other underrepresented groups, that like we can speak for all people, and we can't do that. My idea of the CPC is that we co-govern, like that we do stuff with community, and that are constantly, all of us, working to decenter ourselves in these conversations. So, I mean, I kind of agree with Esther. I personally don't think the CPC, we as a body, have been really firm. I think we and this isn't like attacking anybody in terms of like staff or us as commissioners or co-chairs or whatever, but I want to be more upfront about, like, we're not just recommending we're doing this, we're telling you. Like, we're asking you on behalf of community that you need to provide this information, that it needs to be public so that you can feedback that you want. We can't speak for everybody. So I think next steps are important. Think about how we're going to engage community. But I guess my question is, like, how can we get that information public so that we can build a community engagement forum or opportunity?
Thanks, Alina. If correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a public document, though. Am I correct? This is a public document that can go out.
So it has been PDR'd from us. So we've sent it to a couple journalists after some hesitations from SPD about us doing so. So it has been made public to 2 journalists so far. So.
Okay.
Does that mean they can release that information?
They could, yeah, they could have released it at any time.
Oh, well then can we can we go that avenue and then plan some kind of community forum for that? Even if it's just like, hey, here is a Google form or Google Doc. Community has access to it. They're able to put their questions in there, and then we're able to submit that as a body, and then also have a forum about that.
Yeah, a little bit what I was talking with the strategy committee about was, do you remember, yeah, you were there, with the SPOG and SPMA hearings that we had late last year, some sort of forum that would be similar to that, possibly like 2 or more of them, which could be one on use of force policies and one on crowd control policies, since they're kind of different and can touch on different areas. So we could definitely recommend that forums like that be held on these policy changes, but also open up portals on our website and recommend to SPD that they open up portals on theirs that people can submit feedback through written comment to.
All right, thanks, Jesse. Any other comments, recommendations? Is it possible that, well, I like what Esther said, we need to engage with SPD in terms of partnering with them and having a forum. And if they're not willing to have a forum, then we need to do it on our own. But it'd be great if we could have a forum in January.
I feel like if they're not willing to have a forum, we go to the media and we make a big old deal out of this. So I mean, I like a more aggressive strategy. Like, no, we're not going to take on your responsibility. We're going to hold you accountable to your responsibility. And if you don't follow through with that responsibility, then we're going to make sure that it's called out. That's where I am.
Thanks, Esther.
And Kevin Schofield, that's with the Insight City Hall, also he already has a copy of it, and he's planning on publishing it. So it will be in the public domain. And I'm sure most people know about Kevin. He does Insight City Hall for many years. Thanks.
Thanks, John Walden. Thanks, Kevin.
So it sounds to me like what we are coalescing around, of course, we haven't heard from everyone on the call, but what we're coalescing around is a communication to SPD that says that it is imperative that, our CPC's questions are answered before any feedback from CPC can be provided. A public forum is held. Any of the proposed changes are made public. They are public. The SPD should certainly make them public, but we can do that and ask for that public forum. And if that is not the case, and if we receive any communication and response that says that they are not interested or willing to do that, then we decide to move forward with potentially a forum of our own and or conversations with media about these changes, because they are very significant changes that impact protesters right now and have been for obviously the last several months. If that, forgive me if I'm not encapsulating that appropriately, but
no, you did. Very good. Douglas, I think Douglas raised his hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, Prachi, that sounds right to me. And that sounds good to me. And I appreciate this conversation. This might be naive. I'm just wondering if it would be worth picking up the phone and calling the chief. before sending that letter. It's okay if that doesn't happen. It just occurred to me that, I'm like thinking about how this played out, and the chief's email this morning was like so loaded and so cagey, and there's just so much opportunity for misunderstanding. And I don't even know exactly, we don't know exactly what the chief meant by some of the things that they were saying, like the form versus the substance, just all this stuff. And so I just wonder, it just seems like it'd be helpful to get on the same page, or just have like a quick check-in, even if it's like even if the result ends up being like we actually did understand what they were saying correctly, and just maybe giving them a quick heads up that like, hey, this is our plan moving forward based on what we understand from you folks. But it just seems like there's probably been there's just a lot of potential for misunderstanding, because again, it was just a really loaded email, came at the 11th hour, and it really wasn't super clear.
Thanks, Douglas. I agree with you on that. But yeah, I do believe we need to be more assertive, and not wait for things to happen to make them happen. We waited for things to happen before, and we know the way we operate as a CPC, as is already been stated by Inspector Judge, is we have to collaborate with the community and get behind the community and collect their voices on this. And so we can be more assertive in that respect. I think that's what CPC is all about. Any other comments? I think we have a plan as has been laid out in the conversation here, and Prachi captured it. And Douglas just added something to it. But I do think if they don't have a forum, then we need to plan it. I don't think we should wait for them to do it.
Can we create like a timeline and next steps? Just because we're getting to the holidays and January 8th is going to be here pretty soon. Can we just say like, hey, here are the steps. Here's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the steps. This is the timeline and what we're proposing, just so that we're all on the same page. It's out in the public, and that we can, put that down in the notes.
Yes, can we do that now? Can we put those steps in the notes? Okay. Any other comments? Thanks, Alina.
Can we also just say them out loud once we have them? Like Brandy, I don't know if you have a idea of how you want to move forward. If you want to give the chief a call and just like, hey, like this is what we're gonna do. Like this is gonna be released to the public or posted to the public. We would like to have a community forum. We want SPD to engage in that. We want community to have time that, so and that's not going to be by January 8th. Well, it's about to get tense in here. That's not 8th. But that'll also give us time to relay that information and get it out to people who need it.
I suggest if there are
Yeah,
phone calls, it should also be followed up by a letter just to reinforce it, make sure that it was all, so I agree with that. I'm not trying to step out in front of Brandy, but I just wanted to add, after the phone call, sending the letter of what we have already agreed on to reinforce the phone call.
Okay, Brandy.
I agree with both Reverend Walden and Elena. This is Brandy here. I think as a courtesy, we definitely should reach out and have a phone call and just clarify the email, the intent, and what our intentions are moving forward. And it definitely should be followed up with something written as well. So yeah, any steps after that, I'm trying to capture what has been shared so far, but first steps for me definitely would be to at least have a phone call with Assistant Chief Coordinator, for sure.
Okay,
Randy.
thanks, Brandon.
From the comms piece, just for like letter writing and stuff, would it make sense that if commissioners have any additional questions, that they send them to Brandy by Friday, and then like Friday at noon, we'll send out a letter that's been drafted, reviewed, and we'll attach those questions to it so that those questions have officially been submitted.
I'm actually going to just interject here and give one little correction. For the purposes of communications, it should actually go directly to Jesse. I can be copied, just so I'm able to review it as well. But for the communication strategy, anything like that should go directly to him, and I'll be copied.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. Well, since this is our last meeting for the year, we also just, when this is sent out, if every commissioner can, respond and read the email so that we can move expeditiously on this and won't and be ready when January comes. So just keep your eyes open when this email is sent. Jesse and Brandy sends any information as it relates to this, that would be helpful. Lena just said, so the steps are.
I was going to type them out, but so somebody, Brandy or a co-chair, is going to call the chief to say, just to make sure that we're understanding that email correctly. I think a phone call is probably just easier. Then all commissioners are supposed to review, send their questions to Jesse, CC Brandy by Friday, and then we'll have that to attach a letter to SPD stating our intentions. And then should we give them like a, hey, we're waiting, we want to hear from you by this date? And in the meantime, while we wait for whether or not they're willing to engage in the conversation, I think we can go ahead and plan like a public forum regardless, if that's our intention to do that.
Yeah, should that date be like December 30th or something, or sooner, do you think?
The public forum.
The date to hear back from SPD or
Oh.
Yeah.
What is today?
Yeah, just trying to figure it out with the holidays and such.
Yeah, if you send it by Friday. Yeah, I mean, I think that's
December
plenty
30th.
of time, and that we can still continue to plan. Yeah, by the 30th, SPD needs to respond. And we're going to move forward whether they do or not, but we'd really love to do this in partnership with them.
Perfect.
All right. Any other comments, questions, suggestions?
Just one thing, and just in that phone call to the assistant chief, I think it would be worth mentioning too that it would have been really helpful if they showed up today. Like we have so many questions, and like this could have been a really different meeting if they had showed up and explained what, even if it was just explaining what was in that email, but it would have been really helpful.
Agreed.
Agreed, Douglas. I'll make sure that that is expressed. Agreed, 100%.
And also just to get that email that they weren't going to be able to make it at the last hour, it's just very disturbing to me. Yeah.
And just to get everyone's feedback, just because of the technology capabilities and like experience, and because they were the initial ones to propose the legislation, would it be worth reaching out to like city council to see if they'd like to partner in these public hearings, since they run all like the city council Zooms and have a bunch of experience there and all that?
Great idea, Jesse.
I did, Jesse. We would have to do the lift by ourselves. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank
I
you.
don't think, yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
All right. We landed on a plan of action for this particular segment. I don't think there's anything we need to vote on, so that we'll move to.
Reverend Williams,
Go ahead.
should we get like a smaller group to just like planning the forum? People are going to need time to read through that document. Also, just only being in English, but just so that we're able to create a public forum that is accessible to as many people as possible.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Like if there's no deadline for those policy changes, maybe we can make that by like, I don't know, third week of January, something like that.
I think that's a great idea. So who would like to serve? We need a kind of a subcommittee to plan the forum. Who would like to serve on that?
You can put my name down.
Okay, thanks, Alina. Any others?
I'll take leadership for Milena, so I'll work with her. I mean, I'll work with them. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would like, this is Brandy, I'd like to suggest a community group that has actually been doing a really good job putting community and public information out about just like the collective bargaining and things like that. And that's Braxton and his group. I believe it's SPGA, and I apologize if I'm not saying the acronym correctly, but there's some young folks that have been doing some great work in the community educating folks.
Oh,
so I think
great.
it would be a unique opportunity for us to bring in some community folks to help us with planning a public forum for a community. And it's
Okay.
SGPA, correction.
Okay, thank you. So Braxton would be a great source to. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you, Braxton. I think Prachi, you